like, if you can prove there's no redeeming value. And when they went to screen the film, the prosecutor sat there with his wife and watched the film, and when she's giggling, laughing at Harry Reams being a clown in between the sex scenes, they could prove that the comedic value was of redeeming value, or at least they could argue that they had to drop the charges and drop the case. At the same time that they were being prosecuted, um, you had the movie Carnal Knowledge starring Jack Nicholson, and I think Warren Beatty, but I'm not sure, came out, and they were panicking. Oh, gee, if they're going to go after this movie because it shows this stuff, are they going to come after us too, even though they don't show any genitalia? And that's where the lines, the fuzzy, gray, wide, confusing lines started to get drawn. And then Supreme Court Judge, 1964, I have it written here, Potter Stewart says the famous words, "I know it when I see it," sentencing us to the same problems of the slavery, racism issue, separate but equal. It's dodging the issue. It's completely avoiding the issue. And I think Potter Stewart really handed us a goose egg with that. I really disagree with the way he handled it. He did not define it. He completely, that's what his job was. And he says, "I will not today attempt to further define it." Well, Potter, you should go back to whatever you were doing, because you're useless as a Supreme Court judge. That was embarrassing. And what it did is it created this loophole that said, if any two people want to engage in sex in a recorded manner, then it's considered by law to be dramatic art. And nobody could argue with it, and that paved the way for the commercial porn industry. Well, what happens when you start tinkering with that interpretation? Two things happen. One, yeah, you can shut down the commercial side of things. Two, you start looking at sections of the Holy Bible that when you read a romance novel and it describes in vivid detail people engaging in sex, there's really no difference between the written word and the performed visual thing. There's really no difference when it comes to the definitions of pornography. So where do you draw the line? Do you start editing the Bible? And that's where our plot kind of moves forward. And it's not about what you and your friends think and condone is right. It's about what the Word has to say about this. I've heard that expression, we decided it's not porn, therefore it's not porn. Well, it doesn't make it less porn. Everything's porn. Anything you personally find arousing, doesn't even have to be sexual in nature, is by definition pornographic. That's something I establish in my book, and that's something I kind of hint at here in the film. Now, whether or not it is considered obscene is a different ballgame. Now he's an aspiring filmmaker. Most graduates, or most people who are involved in the film programs on the West Coast, are stuck in a catch-22. Most people want to graduate from, say, UCLA or USC Film School and go on and work at Universal Studios and make the next big E.T. smash hit. Unfortunately, the only work that's really there for them is in the San Fernando Valley, and that's editing together pornographic films. The industry has largely gone that way. It's a shock value-based industry. And it's a disappointing reality check to most people who want to make those movies. So aspiring filmmakers and actors and performers, let that be a reality check to you before you decide to, think you're going to go, stand in the middle of Hollywood and Vine and somebody discover me. Well, yeah, a pornographer would love to just abuse you and treat you as just some piece of meat for a little while and record you and then put you out there and sell you, and you get nothing. Nobody has to pay you anything. Believe me, the system is set up, designed for your failure. And that's a message I wanted to get across here. Now, what I show is God is not afraid to like the Joseph story, send his prophets to prison and send them to some really miserable places where with the Spirit of God, known to us in the New Testament as the Holy Spirit, he takes them through a tough spot, but he makes them a light, such that there's going to be a day when Willie gives a legal testimony and his life is in jeopardy, but God protects him. It causes the industry to stand up, take notice, and basically stop in its tracks, but it also costs the country its civil rights. And it triggers some very bad things that go on. And here I show he's got a family. He's trying to live a reasonable life. He's trying to get through school. He's trying to get out of this rut that he's in. And the church drops the ball. They drop the ball. They've got their own political agenda, and they drop the ball. And I describe that a little bit, both here and later on. Meanwhile, the police are trying to put an end to some of the drug corruption that's going on. And understand something, most of the organized crime that has been trafficking drugs, at this point, they're transitioning into the commercial porn industry because there's more money in the porn industry. And if you want to know what's going to stop the porn industry overall, and I make this comment in the book, it's not legislation, and it's not condemning, making people feel guilty about it. It's not any of that. It's the amateur side of the industry. It's the average person in a webcam. When you can just put your amateur stuff up and it's amusing to show people what's going on in your own bedroom, and you make money at it, it's going to put the guys who are spending a few thousand to a few $1,000,000 to film out of business. Suddenly the guys who are used to doing the big budget commercial stuff, they have to spend more money, and they're not getting as much profit-wise, and eventually their business dies. And when their business dies, their motive to be there is gone. Make no mistake, this industry is not about sex. This industry is completely about the advertising-driven business. Excuse me, I used business 2 times there. The advertising-driven industry. Once the advertising revenue dries up, I promise you, if you could make the Christian film genre more financially lucrative than the porn industry, I promise you more Christian films would be made. But right now, that hasn't been the case. The church has been more willing to just spit in the general direction of pornographers than to reach out to them in love and say, we're going to finance your work, but you got to come get in the Word and learn how to translate a Bible into something on screen, the way Mr. Gibson did in The Passion of the Christ. Now, here what I make clear with the text is, God's hand is not too short. I once heard an episode of Oprah Winfrey say, well, what if there's that tribe in Africa that nobody reaches out to? Are they all going to hell? The answer is God's hand is not too short for anybody. And he doesn't need us. He can speak to people on his own. He doesn't need us. For us to serve and witness to others is a privilege. That's how we stock up treasure in heaven. So that's an ignorant question being asked. Now here's a root of why a lot of people, turn to commercial porn. Why do we watch it? The answer is, and this is from a slang that I used when I was a kid, when the so-called nice girls snub us, the bad girls would charge. And everybody who would go into an adult nightclub many years ago, long before I was a believer, I worked at these stripper joints basically, and people would go into, not just men, everyone, each gender and of all ages would go into these places looking for the same love that they would otherwise find in a church. And when the churches weren't loving on people are going to go where the food is. It's our job to make sure that the food is good, and that's, for us to be a reflection of Christ, is how the food is good, and that's not an easy thing to find in this culture. Here, Willie's got bad taste in women. And before I met my wife, this was me, okay? What I really needed was to fall in love with Jesus Christ. Now, if you told me, hey, Corey, you got to fall in love with Jesus Christ at the age of 20, I was brainwashed to believe that minus a mate, I was dung. I was nothing. And that my idea of falling in love with Jesus Christ had something to do with the actor Robert Powell, who starred in Jesus of Nazareth, the 1977 miniseries that debuted on NBC. And that was a weird thing for me to hear. Plus, I was really measured by whether or not I had a girlfriend or a spouse. And if I didn't, I was garbage. And it wasn't until years later I surrendered that idol, and about 6 months later, I met my beautiful, wonderful wife. And I got to tell you, had I not known how important Jesus Christ was to be at the center of my life,